I started consistently working out at my uncle's home gym when I was 13, and I got my first gym membership when I was 15. Though I never struggled to be consistent, I did make a heck of a lot of lifting mistakes in my first several years of training.
Oh my God, so heavy!
And unfortunately for me, because of being super headstrong and stubborn, I made the same mistakes over and over and over again for years. And repeating those mistakes probably led me to making significantly less progress than I otherwise could have been making. Here's the good news. I'm going to share the top 4 biggest of those mistakes with you so you don't make them yourself and miss out on some serious gains like I did. Just before we dive in, it would be super appreciated if you like this video. Each like does a lot to support the growth of this channel. Thanks in advance. All right, here we go. Mistake number 1. I sacrificed my training technique in favor of lifting weights that were too heavy for me. Like many young lifters, my workouts were fueled by a combination of ego and testosterone. I wanted to lift heavier and heavier. Not only did I want to be able to lift big old weights, I thought that that was the gateway to building big old muscles too. And while it's true that lifting progressively heavier weights over time is a perfectly valid and reliable form of progressive overload for muscle growth, lifting heavier weights with terrible technique is not. See, I would lift heavy weights without much regard to things like moving with a controlled tempo, a full range of motion, or even with a stable setup or structural integrity. I would basically do whatever it took to throw those big old weights around. Ironically, even though I was lifting very heavy, my questionable technique led me to experiencing far less stimulus for muscle growth compared to if I was lifting a bit lighter but with good technique. Plus, it left me with a fairly high rate of injury. And that brings me to mistake number 2, training through joint or connective tissue pain. No pain, no gain, right? Well, yes, but it depends on the kind of pain. As a younger lifter, I would develop suspicious nagging pains around my joints and connective tissue somewhat regularly. And upon feeling those pains start to creep in, I would simply just train through them. I would hope they would just go away, but they would almost always become worse and develop into more serious injuries. The irony in that is, they probably would have healed relatively quickly had I changed the way that I was training to work around the pains, instead of leaving the way I was training unchanged and simply trying to train through them. In retrospect, I should have made changes like lifting lighter when needed, moving with a more controlled tempo, keeping my range of motion more full and consistent, adding pauses at the tops and bottoms of each rep when needed, switching exercises if necessary, and even taking a full rest day if the pain is serious enough. For a long time, I didn't really make many of those changes, so it's no wonder that I experienced injuries so frequently.
Idiot.
But hey, you live and you learn, right? If I can summarize just one thing for you to remember, it's that nagging aches and pains from lifting can very quickly develop into much more serious injuries, unless you change the way you're lifting to work around the aches and pains, not just working through them. All right, mistake number 3. I trained with way too much set volume. To preface this, I do think there is one huge benefit of training with mid to high ranges of training volume across the week as a newer lifter. Although it might not be needed for max amounts of muscle growth, it does provide a greater opportunity to improve at exercise technique and skill. More reps and sets simply equates to more practice time. And being more skilled at lifting will probably lead to more gains in the future. That being so, when I was a younger lifter, right up until my mid-20s, I lifted with what I now believe was far too much training volume. Here's an example. I used to train with bro split, and Saturday was exclusively chest day. For that workout, I would do 6 to 8 different exercises, each with 4 working sets, often with an added drop set at the end of each working set. That's somewhere between 30 to 40 working sets for my chest per session.
Oh, can you imagine?
And honestly, I would often add more than just a single drop set to each exercise. So that would lead me to often training with over 45 sets within a single session.
Holy shit.
What I've learned since then is that training somewhere between 10 to 20 working sets per muscle across the week for most people is probably optimal for maximal amounts of muscle growth. See, after a certain point, including more sets in a given training session likely leads to an over-accumulation of muscle damage and fatigue, to the point of outweighing any extra muscle growth stimulus. In short, it probably leads to more damage than growth. Each person's threshold for the amount of total set volume they can perform within a given training session probably does vary. Some people might benefit from doing 15 to 20 sets for a single muscle within a single session, and others might benefit from doing significantly less than that. All I know is that training with 30 plus sets for one single muscle within a given session for me was almost definitely way too much. How do I know this? 2 main reasons. First reason is I was chronically plateaued and not really getting any stronger. And that makes sense. If I was accumulating more muscle damage and fatigue than I could efficiently recover from. And reason number 2 is I would frequently run into nagging pains and injuries. Using my chest day as an example, I experienced regularly banged up elbows and shoulder joints, as well as inflamed tendons and ligaments around those joints. And that sure as heck is not ideal for muscle growth. Again, one of the main benefits of training with a high amount of set volume is it provides ample opportunity to practice moving with good form. But for me, what probably would have been better would have been to train with somewhere around 15 to 20 sets within a given session for a single muscle, which would have been about half the amount of what I was actually doing. And here is my big mistake number 4, not eating in alignment with my physique goals. I know that this isn't a lifting mistake per se, but it is directly related to lifting nonetheless. See, nutrition is the most prominent lever we can pull when it comes to accomplishing fat loss, and it massively impacts our rate of muscle growth as well. Training is the driver for muscle growth. It's what provides the stimulus for it, but nutrition is what provides the building blocks and the energy for it. That means training like an absolute madman without eating appropriately can lead to a very disappointing lack of progress. Here's the specific mistake that I made. When I first started lifting, my main goals were to build as much muscle as possible and eventually get visible abs with tons of tone and definition. Kind of like Thor.
Holy cow!
I ate tons of food and lots of protein, which was definitely helpful for muscle growth. But in order to get visible abs and become more toned and defined, I needed to lose body fat.
I want my baby back, baby back, baby back, baby back, baby back ribs.
What I failed to understand was that I needed to eat less calories if I was ever going to make that happen. I thought that as long as I trained like a maniac 5 to 6 days a week, including starting each of my workouts with 15 to 20 minutes of direct ab work, my abs would eventually just appear. Alas, even with that kind of consistent training, there was but not a single ab in sight. I just had too much body fat covering them up. That all changed when I finally began to understand that eating in a deficit was what I needed to do to lose body fat to get lean enough to actually see my abs. And sure enough, Ever since figuring that out, getting and maintaining visible abs has been a piece of cake. No pun intended.
Ooh, brownies! I'm taking 2 so I can parcel them up and eat them at my leisure later on. Much healthier.
So, from my experience, overlooking the significance of eating in alignment with your physique goals, whether that be muscle growth or fat loss, is one of the biggest mistakes that you can make. Trust me, I did it for years, and that's it. In retrospect, I would have made far more progress had I not made those mistakes when I was a younger lifter. But even so, a part of me is glad that I made them, since I sure learned a heck of a lot from having done so. And hey, it's made it possible for me to share them with you, so you don't make them. If you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please drop it a like and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more videos like this one. And also, you can follow me as well on my Instagram account @JadeAthletics. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, lift hard, lift smart, and I will see you in the next video.